You want to play this game? Huh? Well, good. It's a good game. Well, let's talk about it. This game, Final Fantasy XIV, masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. You're gonna love it. But there's a few things you might want to know that I learned when I played. Now, first of all, this game is huge. It's giant. It's not a simple, oh, I'll play it for 5 hours and be done. No, this is a commitment. You will be here for a very, very long time if you like it. Disclaimer, I am not here to tell you what game you should or shouldn't play, but I think you'll like this one. Regardless, let's get started.
Final Fantasy XIV Online was released on September 30th, 2010, a whole 11 years ago at this point, and has garnered over 22 million online players. This game has been successful for a very long time, but it didn't start that way. Its initial release, which is now known as 1.0, had a rocky start. The game looks a lot different now than it did back then. The game was so different back then, and a lot of fans were very mixed about it, so they did a whole reboot, pretty much, and that is what we now know as today as A Realm Reborn, which is also known as 2.0. But man, when you look at the 1.0 footage, it's like night and day. I mean, we go from this, fast-paced, super flashy, to this. It looks almost like a beta version of the game we have now, but, humble beginnings. And these beginnings, interestingly enough, tie into the game's main story, which is good and bad. Good because that's just super fascinating how you can turn an almost disaster of your game into a story bit for your game, but also bad because if these YouTube videos didn't exist about what the game looked like and the story surrounding the game, there would be no way for the player to get this piece of knowledge because the 1.0 content takes place 5 years before the 2.0 content. And that's a lot of story that you're missing. It may not be super important to understand the 2.0 story. You're not missing too much information, but they do reference it and talk about it a lot, especially in A Realm Reborn. And speaking of A Realm Reborn, let's talk about that a little bit. About how this game is split into multiple parts of a gigantic story.
So, this game is split into 4, soon to be 5 parts. You have A Realm Reborn, which is where you start from level 1 to 50. This is where you'll be spending the majority of your time. It is very slow. It has a very slow beginning, very humble beginnings. But once you get your foot in this door, by golly, does it get good. But this is very important. This is where you learn how to do pretty much everything. From how the game works, how the game wants you to work, and how gear works. Good golly, gear is important. Do not neglect your gear. If you do not have good gear, if you do not have the most up-to-date recent gear for your level, not only are you going to be trash, you'll be made fun of. You probably won't, but regardless, it won't be fun. Now, I get it. The gear that's for your level will not always look good. It will look trash. But there are ways to get over it.
Now, gear works in 2 ways in this game. You either use it for the stats or use it for cosmetics. And how cosmetics work in this game is pretty much with what they call the glamour system. Now, let's say you have this awesome armor set that gives you amazing stats and everything, and you just can't get rid of it, but the armor that you had at level 20 you think still looks good, still has that awesome drip and fire to it, and you want to wear that instead. So what you could do is keep the armor that you have on and just glam over the armor that you have with the old armor set. So you can still use that level 20 armor as a look, but you'll keep the same stats that you had previously. It's a nice way to keep a lot of the equipment that you have that you actually like the looks of, up to date and relevant. You can still use it, but you don't have to sacrifice armor and abilities and stats. And it also just gives you plenty of options for armor in general and many ways to customize yourself. That way not everybody's out here looking the same.
Important gear. You gotta make sure you have it. You gotta make sure you are wearing the tip-top material so you do not get yourself hurt or your team killed. This is a team game. This is an MMORPG, which means it is massively multiplayer and online. There are a lot of people here. And when you do dungeons, when you do raids, when you do all sorts of things like that, you are not working alone. You're working for a team, you're working for a unit. And your unit, just like you, needs to have good gear, or else they'll die. No one wants to die. Moving on, we have Heaven's Ward, which is part 2 of the story. And this is from 50 to 60. The 10 jump is something that'll happen, so get used to it. 50 to 60. Now, this is where the story really reels you in and keeps you. It'll keep you. It'll make you cry, it'll make you sad, it'll make you happy. I've never had such conflicting emotions while playing a game than when I played this part of the story. Also, because the voice acting changed on me. That was weird and I was not ready for it.
'Tis true that Eorzea yet has her guardians. The Scions have achieved much, and 'twould be remiss of me to discard it all in a fit of self-pity. Let us then resume our journey, together, one step at a time.
The dawn's light will shine again.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
But you know what, it's fine. But this is where things can get difficult if you're not paying attention, if you're not ready. This is where I learned where gear was important. A little late, but you know what, it's fine. Remember, there are gear requirements. You have to meet a certain requirement or else you cannot play certain portions of the game. So it's important to have gear. I will keep mentioning this until you remember. Once you get to level 50, you beat the story up to that point, there are a lot of things that open up. You have a lot of optional dungeons to get gear, to level up if that's what you want to do, or just to challenge yourself with interesting fights. There are also special fights. Each expansion has their own set of special fights known as trials, which are basically just a big word for boss battles. And these boss battles have normal modes and they have extreme modes. The extreme modes, if you beat them, has a certain chance of giving you a mount, which is pretty much just a thing you ride around town. And they can be cool. A Reborn gives you horses. Nice looking horses to ride. And Heaven's Ward, once you get to the 60 content, gives you birds. Yeah, they give you birds. Horses, birds. Farm those because they're pretty cool if you're into that. I love collecting things, so needless to say I'm into that. Moving on, we go on to Stormblood, and Stormblood is from 60 to 70. Now the story here, gets intense. The story really just, it gets intense, man. Not as emotionally gripping. It did not emotionally grip me that much. It did for a few moments, but not as much as Heaven's Ward. I was not as emotionally disturbed during this section of the game than I was with Heaven's Ward. But it's still good. It does not have to bring me through a roller coaster of emotions to make it good. It's still good. Still a lot of nice moments weave in. But yeah, it's just more intense, more action heavy, more just I don't want to spoil it, but it's just good. But anyway, 60 to 70. This is as far as my knowledge will take you, as far as the story. Well, as far as anything, because I don't really know too much past this. My highest level is 70, and yeah, it took me a while to get here. But this is the last little bit of story that I've seen, and it's pretty good. It's really good. But anyway, 60 to 70. This is where things can get tricky, because for the level 50 content and a little bit 60 content, you know, for the most part, if you're really over leveled, you can just steamroll everything. You don't even have to think unless you're doing the extreme stuff or the mounts. But you really don't have to think other than that. And a little pro tip, if you are really high level and you want to do some of the old content that was labeled really hard, you can easily do it at this level, especially a little bit, especially once you get to 80, you could really do all of this, all the level 50 stuff by yourself. You don't need help. You don't need any help. You don't need nobody to help you. You're an independent woman at this point who don't need no man. You don't need anything. But I'm not at that point quite yet, but just know that you start. This is this part of the story where you really get overpowered. big numbers really start popping up and you really start doing some damage, especially for DPS. Goodness gravy, you do a lot of damage. And pro tip, Samurai kills. That's a lot of damage. And it looks really cool. But yeah, speaking of Samurai, let me talk about jobs. Because everyone needs a job. So, in this game, there's a class system, and there's a job system. The class system is pretty much, you're in high school, thinking about, oh, what do I want to do with my life? Oh man, there's just so many options. Then the job system is you're in college. You know what you want, or at least you should, or at least you're flip-flopping. I don't know. But the job system is pretty much the upgraded version of the class system. For example, I was a gladiator. I first started as a gladiator. That was my first class in the game. I loved it. It was beautiful. Then I upgraded. I got a job, and my job now is paladin. I am a human meat shield. I take all the damage, and I laugh in the face of danger. But that's my job. There are jobs, classes, and there's roles. Each class, each role has each class, each job has a role. If you are a gladiator, you are a tank. And if you are a paladin, you are a tank. Your role is that of a tank. And the tank, again, is a human meat shield. The roles are simple. There's tanking, there's DPSing, which is pretty much the big damage boys, and then there's healers. That's really it. It's pretty simple. You're either taking all the damage, healing all the damage, or doing all the damage. There is no in between. So, pretty simple to remember. But these jobs are not the easiest things in the world, especially if you're trying to be a healer, especially if you're trying to be a tank. Tank is probably one of the hardest. Probably. I don't know. I just know there's a lot of anxiety about it because you're leading the pack. You're in front of the charge. And sure, the healer is just as important because if I don't get healed, I can only take so much damage and I'm dead. If I'm dead, then everybody else is dead. That's kind of the funny thing about tanking and healing, is that if we're dead, everyone's dead. So you better keep me alive. Better keep the healer alive. Do your damage, do your job. Doing your roles, doing your job is the most important thing when you start doing dungeons and when you start doing just any multiplayer content. Because the story content you can easily steam through besides the dungeons. The dungeons is where your abilities to play the game are tested. You have to make sure you know what job you have, what role you are assigned to, and do the best you can. Now, thankfully, the community for Final Fantasy XIV is very, very forgiving. Because when you are brand new, you will have a symbol over your head that is pretty much a tiny little leaf, tiny little sprout. Or, as you say, it is literally, that's what it's called sprout. You are a sprout, you're a beginner player. It's pretty much, this symbol tells the world, oh, you don't know what you're doing. Oh, you're new. And because of that, they won't expect too much of you. Even if you have done it before, they still won't expect too much of you. Because you are liable to make mistakes, you're liable to not know what you're doing, you're still learning because you're new. And no one's gonna blame you for that. And they shouldn't. If they do, don't blame yourself. Blame them. They're just being rude. So, yeah. This symbol is your get out of jail free card. It's not an excuse, but it will allow you to not get ridiculed for not knowing what you're doing, because you don't know what you're doing. So, the Final Fantasy XIV community really lets you learn, and they're very willing to teach you. There are a lot of events that I got into personally where people were like, hey, you're new, do you want to know how to do this? And I was saying, heck yes, I would love to know how to do this because I don't know how to do this. Please tell me, Sensei, especially as a tank, because I have to know what I'm doing. I have to know where I need to be. I have to know where this big boy needs to be. I need to know how much I can pull without the healer freaking out and not being able to heal me, or without me freaking out and not being able to tank all the hits. It's not as bad as it looks. I know I'm saying a lot, but there's just a lot to consider. But it's not that bad. This game is actually very fun to play. And once you really get into it and know what you need to do, it's not that bad. There are a lot of events that were really hard that I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but because I knew my class, because I knew my job, because I knew my role, it was pretty simple. So, remember your classes, remember your jobs, remember your roles. Once you get your class, you soon upgrade. At level 30, all classes become jobs. At level 30, all classes become jobs, and each class and job has a role. You don't get, your role is just your designated thing, I did not try healing. I do not want to heal. I don't need that kind of pressure on my life. I don't. I have too much anxiety. I could not do it. I could not do it. It's hard for me to tank as it is. I don't need to be trying to keep people alive by healing. People who can, I commend you, but I cannot. So, anyway, moving on to more personal conclusion of my little presentation. This game is a good game. You choose to play it, you made a good choice as far as MMOs go. I've never played an MMO before. This is the first one I've ever played, and I put days worth of hours into this game. This game, days worth of hours. It's a beautiful game. You definitely should play it if you are into MMOs, if you love Final Fantasy, if you love good stories. This is a good one. Now, again, there's more story here. There is Shadowbringers, which is 70 to 80. I'm on my way here. I'm on my way to Grandma's house. Not quite there yet. I'm kind of taking my time. I want to do some of the 70, I want to do some of the 70 content from Shadowbringers Stormblood, before I get into Shadowbringers. But it'll be exciting because there's a lot here. There's a lot here. But after that, in November, there will be a new, I thought, final installment. But apparently they're going to continue the story, but it's going to focus on a different thing. But anyway, they will be bringing us Endwalker from 80 to 90, which will be interesting to see. But that's in November, and there's only so much information out on it. They'll have a few new classes, and story-wise, I don't know what's going on. I didn't want to watch a trailer. I have not seen a trailer. I don't want to see a trailer, because at this point, I'm really into the story, and I don't want to be spoiled. Not that there would be huge spoilers, but just spoilers enough. Like, I don't want to ask too many questions. I want to see Shadowbringers and what it has to bring first before I watch that trailer, so I want to go in blind. I like being blind. What? Anyway, but yeah. That is Final Fantasy XIV, the game that has stood the test of time. This game has been around for like 11 plus years. And I feel like with the big end of the world situation that we have going on recently, a lot of people have been playing this game now more than ever. It has 22 million players playing, so say, or over 22 million. I don't know, something like that, somewhere around there. I'm not good with math. It has a huge player base. A lot of nice people. I met a lot of people here. And it's really cool. It's a really fun game. Really nice environment. And it's a nice, fun game to put some hours into. Especially if you just want to dip in, play a little bit, and dip out. Nice little experience. If you need an MMO to play, if you want good story, this is the game for you. This is really the game for you. But if you don't, what's my advice? You know, I'm just a guy. Anyway, my name is Tyler Thomas. This has been your educational gaming lesson. And I will see you next time on the next video. So pack your bags, your bell doesn't dismiss you, I do, and you are dismissed.